"Daddy's here," the stranger whispered, bouncing my son on his hip. My boy reached for him, not me. Vanessa stared through me. A deputy stepped between us and served me. Not on the birth certificate. Temporary custody to them. Effective now. I sagged, choking on daisies I bought for homecoming. I came home from deployment unannounced, and I recorded everything. Duty logs, transfers, doorbell clips, dates that don't lie. They thought a staged welcome could erase me in 14 days. They had papers, I had proof, and a target date. Watch what happens when a soldier fights with receipts. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is George Cole, and I'm 34 years old. I spend my days following the rhythms of military life, from pre-dawn PT to evening equipment checks, all while holding tight to the photos of my son Gavin that line my footlocker. My partner Vanessa's calls have grown shorter lately, her voice carrying an edge I can't quite place. The sand here in the desert works its way into everything. My boots, my gear, even the carefully folded letters I've kept from every stage of my deployment. I document everything meticulously. Duty logs, video messages, wire transfers. A habit that's earned me more than a few jokes from my unit. When Vanessa's tone shifts during our calls, something in my gut tightens. But I've got years of paperwork that tell their own story. But let me start from the beginning. The wheels touched down at 0847, and I felt lighter than my armor for the first time in months. After clearing customs, I made a quick stop at the florist near base, the same one where I'd bought Vanessa roses when Gavin was born. The woman behind the counter remembered me, said something about how time flies, but I was already focused on getting home. You know that feeling when you're so close to something good, your chest gets tight. That's how I felt driving down our street, past the park where I'd once promised myself I'd be the kind of father I never had. The morning sun caught the new key fob in my hand, a simple silver circle with Dad etched in clean letters. I'd ordered it special, thinking about all those times I'd unlocked the door coming home from work, maybe with Gavin running to meet me. The flowers sat in the passenger seat. Yellow daisies, Vanessa's favorite. We'd picked them for the hospital room when Gavin was born, right before my deployment notice came through. The memory of his tiny fingers wrapped around mine still kept me warm during cold desert nights. I parked in our usual spot, right under the maple tree we'd talked about hanging a swing from. Everything looked the same. The blue shutters I'd painted that spring. The garden boxes I'd built before shipping out. But something felt off, like when you walk into a room and can't quite place what's changed. My boots hardly made a sound on the front walk. All that sand finally good for something, I guess. Standing at the door, I could hear music inside, some children's show tune I didn't recognize. My hand shook slightly as I raised it to knock. Funny how facing incoming fire hadn't made me this nervous, but the thought of holding my son again had my heart hammering like a cadenced drum. 3 quick knocks. Footsteps approached. The door swung open, and my world tilted sideways. A man I'd never seen before stood there, holding my son. He was wearing casual clothes, looking completely at home, like he belonged there. Gavin, my God, how he'd grown, was perched on this stranger's hip, wearing dinosaur pajamas and a happy smile. "Hey, buddy, Daddy's here," the man cooed, bouncing Gavin slightly. My son giggled and reached for him like it was the most natural thing in the world. The flowers nearly slipped from my grip. Something cold and hard settled in my stomach as I watched my child, my flesh and blood, snuggle into this stranger's shoulder. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Training kicks in when your mind can't process what's happening. Document everything. Maintain evidence. Stay focused. George. Vanessa's voice cut through my daze. She appeared behind them, arms crossed, face set in stone. "What are you doing here? What am I—" I had to swallow before I could continue. "I'm home. I'm here for my son. Your son." Her laugh was sharp, nothing like the warm sound I remembered. "You abandoned us. You chose to leave." "I was deployed, Vanessa. You know that. We talked about—" "Sir." A new voice joined in, and I turned to see a sheriff's deputy stepping onto the porch. He'd been waiting just out of sight. Like this was all choreographed. "I need you to take these." He extended a manila envelope. "My training took over again. Accept documents with your left hand, maintain situational awareness, control your breathing." The papers inside were legal documents, crisp and official. Words jumped out at me. Temporary custody order, sole physical custody, father not listed on birth certificate. I looked up at Gavin, who was watching me with curious eyes that didn't recognize me beyond being a stranger at the door. He reached toward me then, not in recognition, but with that simple toddler's curiosity about new things. Before I could react, the deputy stepped between us. "Sir, you've been served. I suggest you contact the court for your hearing date." The man holding my son, holding him like he had the right, stepped back into the house. Vanessa moved to close the door, her eyes cold and determined. The last thing I saw was Gavin's little hand waving. Not at me, but at something colorful on the TV behind them. The door clicked shut. I stared at the papers in my hand, the government watermark swimming before my eyes. The deputy shifted his weight, his badge catching the afternoon sun. "August 26th hearing date, sir. That's when you can present your case to the judge." His tone was professional, but not unkind. "Until then, this order's in full effect. 14 days. 2 weeks to somehow prove I was my son's father. The same amount of time we'd spent in pre-deployment quarantine, except now every second felt like it was slipping through my fingers like desert sand. "Can I—" My voice cracked. I cleared my throat, tried again. "Can I at least say goodbye to him?" The deputy glanced at the door, then back at me. "I don't recommend that, sir. The order's pretty clear about contact." Through the front window, I could see Gavin bouncing on that stranger's knee, the same way I used to bounce him during our video calls back when he was small enough to fit in the crook of my arm. The memory of his baby laugh through my laptop speakers felt like a punch to the gut. "Son," the deputy said quietly, "you need to leave now." I nodded, muscle memory from years of following orders taking over. My feet carried me down the walkway while my mind was still caught in that doorway, watching my child reach for another man's embrace. The flowers lay forgotten on the welcome mat, yellow petals already starting to wilt in the summer heat. Back in my truck, I sat with both hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. The dashboard clock blinked 2:47 p.m. How could everything change so completely in less than 15 minutes? I'd survived firefights that lasted longer than that. The papers sat in my passenger seat, where the flowers had been. August 26th. The date seemed to mock me, printed in bold courthouse font. 2 weeks to fight a battle I hadn't even known was coming, with weapons I didn't understand how to use. I reached for my phone, then stopped. Who would I even call? My CO would need to know eventually, but right now, I couldn't find the words to explain how I'd lost my son without firing a single shot. A sharp rap on my window made me jump. I turned, half expecting the deputy again, maybe with more papers, more ways to tear my life apart. Instead, I found myself looking into the weathered face of Master Sergeant Victor Hale. He'd retired last year after nearly 3 decades of service, settled somewhere in the area. The last time I'd seen him was at his retirement ceremony, where he'd told me to look him up if I ever needed anything. I rolled down the window, trying to pull myself together. "Master Sergeant!" "Save it!" He cut me off, leaning against my truck door. His eyes flickered to the papers, then back to me. Saw the whole thing from my morning walk. "You fight with paperwork now, son." The simple statement hit me harder than any of the legal jargon. fight with paperwork, like it was just another mission, another objective to secure. I don't even know where to start, Master Sergeant. I gestured at the custody order. She's got court orders, claims I abandoned them. Hell, I'm not even on his birth certificate. But you've got deployment orders, pay records, proof you've been supporting them. He wasn't asking. He knew how the military worked, how everything got documented. Video calls, money transfers, all of it tracked and time-stamped. I nodded slowly, remembering all the records I'd obsessively kept. Every video call screenshot, every wire transfer, every email about Gavin's doctor appointments that I'd archived while overseas. First thing tomorrow, 0800, my place, Hale said, already pushing off from my truck. Bring every piece of paper you've got from the past 3 years, every receipt, every order, every damn birthday card. We're going to build your case, like we used to build mission briefs. He started to walk away, then turned back. And Cole? You're not in this alone. Clear? Clear, Master Sergeant. He gave a short nod and moved off down the street, leaving me with something I hadn't had 5 minutes ago, a plan of action. August 26th was still circled in red on those court papers, but now it felt less like a deadline and more like a target. Master Sergeant Hale's kitchen table looked like a command center by 0900. We had 3 laptops open, stacks of papers sorted by date, and a timeline sketched out on printer paper taped together end to end. The coffee pot had already been emptied twice. Here, I said, pulling up my phone's photo archive. Every video call screenshot from deployment. See the timestamps? 2, sometimes 3 times a week, never missed more than 10 days straight, even during operations. Hale nodded, making notes in his precise military handwriting. Good. Shows consistent contact pattern. What about the money trail? I pulled out a manila folder thick with paper. Wire transfers, every 2 weeks like clockwork. Extra during holidays. Christmas gifts, birthday presents, even got the receipts for that custom crib I had delivered before deployment. The smell of coffee and gun oil from Hale's workspace brought back memories of mission planning in plywood offices overseas. Funny how some skills transfer. Analyzing intel, establishing patterns, building a case, piece by piece. Let's hit the daycare next, Hale said, checking his watch. They'll have records of who's authorized for pickup, emergency contacts, all that bureaucratic gold. The daycare center was a cheerful building with cartoon animals painted on the windows. Inside, the director remembered me from the enrollment paperwork I'd signed before deployment. Of course, she said, pulling up files on her computer. Here's Mr. Cole listed as emergency contact, right under Mom. And all his deployment contact information. Oh, and look, he even sent us updated numbers when their unit moved bases. I felt a weight lift as she printed the documents, hard proof that I'd stayed involved, stayed responsible. The kind of evidence that could shred that abandonment claim to pieces. But Hale wasn't done. The doorbell camera, he reminded me as we left. You mentioned it in the truck yesterday. Right. The Ring camera I'd installed before leaving. Another habit from military life, always securing the perimeter. We drove to my old neighbor's house, the one who'd helped keep an eye on things while I was gone. Been meaning to tell you something about that camera feed, she said, inviting us in. Started seeing this same car showing up regular, about 3 months into your deployment. Same guy, staying overnight more and more. She pulled up the saved footage on her phone. There it was, timestamp after timestamp showing the stranger's car. Him using a key to enter my house, carrying groceries, taking out trash like he owned the place. The latest clip was from just last week, him playing with my son in the front yard. This is solid gold, Hale said, as we settled into a booth at the local diner to review everything. Shows premeditation, deliberate replacement of the father figure, timeline of when it all started. I was actually starting to feel hopeful. Spreading the documents across the table while our burgers got cold, the evidence painted a clear picture. A devoted father, serving his country, sending money home, staying involved despite the distance. No judge could look at this and see abandonment. "Excuse me, Mr. Cole?" I looked up to find a man in a suit standing by our table. My stomach dropped before he even pulled out the envelope. "You've been served." The restraining order was printed on heavy paper, official courthouse letterhead at the top. My hands shook as I read the accusations. Showed up in an aggressive manner, displayed threatening behavior, posed immediate danger to mother and child. "This is bull," I started to say, but Hale's hand on my arm stopped me. "Read it all," he said quietly. Every word. The terms were crystal clear. No contact with Vanessa or Gavin. No approaching within 500 feet of the house. No calls, no messages, no attempts at communication through third parties. Violation would mean immediate arrest. I set the paper down carefully, afraid I might crumple it if I held on any longer. All our morning's work, all the evidence we'd gathered, none of it mattered if I couldn't even get near enough to present it. "She's playing dirty," Hale said, studying my face, "using the system against you, trying to push you into doing something stupid." The diner suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Every customer could be another process server, another official with more papers to strip away what was left of my rights as a father. The restraining order sat like a lead weight in my pocket as I walked into the law office Hale had recommended. The secretary's smile dimmed when she saw my uniform, probably used to soldiers with family troubles. Ever notice how certain professions can read your problem before you say a word? "Ms. Kent will see you now," she said, gesturing toward an open door. The attorney was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with reading glasses perched on her head and case files stacked precisely on her desk. Something in her sharp eyes reminded me of our battalion intelligence officer, the kind who could spot patterns others missed. "Master Sergeant Hale called ahead," she said, motioning me to sit. "Tell me everything, starting with the deployment dates." I laid out the timeline while she took rapid notes. My departure date, the video calls that grew shorter, the money transfers, the surprise homecoming that wasn't a surprise to everyone. When I mentioned the restraining order, her pen stopped. "Show me." She read it twice, then reached for her phone. "Jerry, bring your laptop." "Yes, now." The forensic examiner who joined us looked more like a college professor than a tech expert, complete with elbow patches on his sweater. He set up his equipment while I described the benefit forms Vanessa had filed during my deployment. Military dependent cards, insurance updates, tax documents. "The system requires two-factor authentication and e-signatures," I explained. "I couldn't have signed anything while I was overseas without my CAC card and personal codes." Jerry's fingers flew across the keyboard. "When exactly were you in Qatar?" I pulled out my deployment orders, and his eyebrows rose. Well, look at this, Carol." Ms. Kent leaned in to study his screen. "IP address traces to an apartment complex on Wilson Street. Can you get the unit number?" "Already did. Unit 412. The attorney turned to me. "Does that address mean anything to you?" "No, but—" I stopped, remembering something. "Wait, Vanessa mentioned her friend living in Plaza Heights while I was gone. That's on Wilson. The same friend whose name keeps showing up on these daycare pickup logs?" She tapped a folder. "The one who's now claiming to be your son's father?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, him." Jerry kept typing. "The e-signatures for all these forms came from that IP address. Timestamps show access patterns consistent with someone living there, not just visiting. Multiple logins, different times of day, spanning months. This is good," Ms. Kent said. "Very good. We can prove document fraud, unauthorized access to military benefits, possibly identity theft. But," I could hear it coming in her tone, "but exposing this will trigger a nuclear response. She'll know she's caught, and people who feel cornered tend to—" "Lash out," I finished. Years of combat training had taught me the same lesson. 3 days later, her warning proved prophetic. The envelope arrived at my temporary quarters via certified mail. Inside was a document I had to read 3 times before the words made sense. Voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, dated 4 months into my deployment, naming him as my son's biological father. That desert heat I thought I'd left behind came rushing back, along with the taste of sand and bile. The signature looked perfect, every loop and curve exactly how I write my name. The notary stamp was clear, the witness signatures precise. I drove straight to Ms. Kent's office. She studied the document under bright light, comparing it to my military records. "They're good," she admitted. "Very good. But they made one mistake." "What's that?" "They got greedy with the date. You were verifiably 7,000 miles away when this was supposedly signed. No judge will believe you teleported back for a quick notary visit." But as she spoke, I watched the calendar on her desk. August 26th was circled in red, the custody hearing. 2 weeks had become 10 days, and now we were down to 8. Each new document felt like another handful of sand slipping through my fingers. "Time isn't on our side," Ms. Kent said, reading my thoughts. "And this paternity acknowledgement, forged or not, carries legal weight until we can prove otherwise. We need—" Her phone buzzed. The secretary's voice came through. "Major Williams from Fort Carson on line 1. Says it's about Captain Cole's situation." I felt my stomach clench. Command involvement could only mean one thing. This was about to get even more complicated. I spread everything across Master Sergeant Hale's kitchen table. A battlefield map made of paper trails. Wire transfer receipts fanned out like playing cards, each one showing monthly support payments. Video messages I'd recorded from my plywood shelter, dates stamped and backed up. Letters I'd written by hand when the internet was down, complete with postmarked envelopes. "Good," Hale said, organizing them by date. "But we need more than just proof you sent money. I've got deployment orders, travel logs, combat pay records." I pulled out another folder. Every time I called the daycare to check on him. Every gift I shipped home. The smell of coffee, real coffee, not the instant stuff we lived on overseas, drifted from Hale's ancient percolator. It reminded me of Sunday mornings before deployment, when I'd brew a pot while assembling that crib, piece by piece. "What about your command? They know what's happening?" I nodded. Kept my first sergeant updated. "Figure transparency is—" My phone buzzed. Fort Carson area code. "Speaking of command," I muttered, stepping onto Hale's back porch. "Captain Cole here, sir." "Cole!" Major Williams's voice carried that careful tone senior officers use before bad news. "Need you in my office. Now." The drive to base felt longer than usual. I'd seen that tone before, usually before telling someone their career path was about to shift sideways. The guard at the gate checked my ID twice, probably noting the address change in the system. Major Williams was waiting at his desk, reading glasses perched low as he studied a file. My file, based on the familiar tabs marking deployments. "Sit down, Cole." I settled into the chair, back straight, face neutral. 15 years of military bearing kicking in automatically. "Sir." He removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Got a call from JAG this morning. They're tracking your situation." My stomach tightened. JAG involvement meant this had escalated beyond a simple custody dispute. "Your record's solid, Cole. Combat decorations, rapid promotion track, high marks across the board." He tapped the file. "That's why you're slated for the advanced course next spring. Career maker." "Thank you, sir." "But—" He leaned forward. "Any hint of scandal, any public drama that reflects poorly on the service, that slot goes to someone else, along with the promotion board consideration that comes with it. The implications hung there. Lose the advanced course, lose momentum for major, lose that, and the 20-year retirement track starts looking shaky. There's also the matter of your retention bonus coming due, he continued. $250,000 isn't something the Army hands out to officers generating negative headlines. I thought of my lawyer's retainer, the mounting legal fees, the separate apartment I'd had to lease. That bonus wasn't just money. It was ammunition for the custody fight. What exactly are you saying, sir? I'm saying tread carefully. Keep things civil. Maybe consider a private settlement. He slid my file closed. Some battles aren't worth the collateral damage. The message was clear. Play it safe or watch my career implode. 15 years of service, multiple combat tours, perfect fitness scores. None of it would matter if this turned messy. How much time do I have to decide, sir? August 26th is your court date, correct? At my nod, he checked his calendar. That gives you 8 days to either resolve this quietly or risk losing everything you've built here. 8 days. The same countdown I was already racing against for custody now applied to my career, too. 2 wars, 1 deadline. Understood, sir. Will that be all? One more thing. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the parade ground. The Army's been good to you, Cole. Good career, good benefits. Some would say that's worth protecting. The implicit suggestion hung there. Take the deal they're offering. Alternate weekends, supervised visits, fade quietly into the background of my son's life. I left his office with my shoulders squared, but my mind spinning. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone to text Hale, then stopped. The screen showed a photo I'd set as wallpaper. My son on his 2nd birthday, wearing the tiny Army ACUs I'd sent him. He was saluting the camera, grinning with chocolate cake on his face. 8 days to save both my career and my role as his father. Or choose between them. The proposed custody agreement sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. 3 pages that could end this war with a single signature. The ceiling fan clicked steadily overhead, marking time as I stared at the stark black text. Remember those late-night guard shifts in Afghanistan? The ones where exhaustion made even the dumbest ideas start looking reasonable? This felt similar. My eyes kept drifting over the same phrases. Alternating weekends, supervised visitation, no overnight stays until age 5. I grabbed my coffee mug, the one Gavin had picked out last Father's Day, with "World's Best Dad" in wobbly letters. The coffee inside had gone cold hours ago, but I drank it anyway. The bitter taste matched my mood. The deal wasn't awful, objectively speaking. I'd get to see Gavin every other weekend, plus some holidays. Phone calls twice a week. The supervision requirement would drop after 6 months of demonstrated stability. Major Williams's warning about my career echoed in my head. This could make all that go away. No scandal, no risk to my advanced course slot, no jeopardizing my retention bonus. But 3 years before any overnight stays? Gavin would be 5 before I could tuck him into bed, read him stories, or make him breakfast. The thought of missing those moments made my chest ache worse than any ruck march ever had. I pulled out my phone, thumbing through photos from deployment. Video calls where he'd press his face close to the screen, babbling about his day. Screenshots of text messages discussing his first steps, his favorite foods, the songs that made him dance. All those careful records I'd kept, proving I'd been there every way I could. Some battles aren't worth the collateral damage, Major Williams had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe fighting this would cost more than I could afford to lose. The papers seemed to mock me from the table. 1 signature, and it would be over. I could still be part of Gavin's life, just not the part I'd promised to be. Not the father who shows up every morning, who teaches him to ride a bike, who checks for monsters under the bed. I picked up the pen, my hand surprisingly steady. The metal was cool against my fingers as I uncapped it. Just a few strokes of ink, and I could stop fighting. Stop risking everything I'd built. The fan clicked above me. Once, twice, 3 times. My phone buzzed. Hale's name lighting up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. What was left to say? But 15 years of military discipline doesn't let you ignore a call from a senior NCO, even a retired one. "It's late," I answered. "Don't sign anything." His voice had that sharp edge I remembered from mission briefings. "Meet me at 0700, Jerry's Diner." "Hale, I've got the papers right here. Maybe it's time to— There's something you need to see first." He paused. "Something new? What kind of something?" "Oh, 700, he repeated. "And bring those custody papers with you." The line went dead before I could argue. I stared at the phone, then at the unsigned agreement. The pen felt heavier in my hand. What could be new? We'd gone through everything. Deployment records, money transfers, phone logs, every scrap of evidence that proved I'd been a father from 7,000 miles away. But Hale didn't waste time on dead ends. If he said there was something to see— I set the pen down. The ceiling fan clicked steadily overhead as I gathered the papers into their envelope. Maybe surrender could wait until morning. I walked to my bedroom, still sparse, just a mattress and some boxes I hadn't bothered unpacking. On the nightstand sat the only decoration, a framed photo of Gavin and me, taken the day before I deployed. We were both grinning at the camera, my patrol cap perched crookedly on his tiny head. "Remember, buddy," I told him that day, "Daddy always comes back." Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay there watching shadows crawl across the ceiling, the custody agreement on my nightstand like a court-martial verdict waiting to be read. Every so often, my phone would light up with calendar notifications. 7 days until the hearing. 7 days to decide which promises I could bear to break. At 06:30, I was already dressed and grabbing my keys. Whatever Hale had found, it had better be good. Because right now, that unsigned agreement was starting to look like the only way out of this mess that didn't end with me losing everything. I pulled into Jerry's Diner at 06:45, 15 minutes early. Old habits die hard. The morning air still had that pre-dawn chill, and the parking lot was empty, except for Hale's familiar pickup truck. Through the window, I could see him already set up in a corner booth, papers spread out like a tactical map. The bell chimed as I walked in. The smell of coffee and griddle grease hit me, same as every morning chow I'd had stateside for the past decade. Some things don't change, even when your whole world's turned upside down. "Brought those papers?" Hale asked without looking up. I pulled the custody agreement from my jacket. "Right here, still unsigned." "Good." He took a long sip from his coffee mug, then pushed a document across the table. "Take a look at this." The paper was crisp, official-looking, an affidavit with a notary seal in the corner. I started reading, and my stomach dropped. I, George Cole, being of sound mind. The words blurred as I scanned down. "Hereby voluntarily relinquish all parental rights and claims." "Keep reading," Hale said quietly. "Check the date and notary. June 15th. The notary's name jumped out at me. Margaret Keats. Keats? My voice sounded distant in my own ears. "Any relation to— Brandon's mother?" Hale nodded. "Licensed notary public for the past 8 years. June 15th. The date kept pulling at my memory. I pulled out my phone, thumbed through my photos until I found what I was looking for. A group shot, me and my unit standing in front of our compound. Sand and concrete walls in the background, sun beating down mercilessly. The timestamp read June 15th. I was in Kandahar that day. The words came out flat. 7,000 miles away. "You were," Hale confirmed. "And unless you figured out how to be in 2 places at once, this document is about as genuine as a $3 bill." The diner's fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright. This wasn't just Vanessa falling for someone else while I was deployed. This wasn't just Brandon moving in and playing daddy to my son. This was calculated, planned. They'd actually forged documents to erase me legally. "The benefits paperwork," I said slowly. "The paternity acknowledgement, this affidavit. They weren't covering their tracks. They were laying groundwork. Now you're thinking straight. Hale pulled out another sheet. Look at the IP addresses again. The e-signatures, the benefit changes. They all trace back to Brandon's apartment complex. Started 3 months before you were due home. My hands wanted to shake, but training kicked in. Stay focused. Assess the situation. Plan your move. They thought I wouldn't fight it, I realized. Or if I did, they had all this paperwork ready to shut me down. Make it look like I'd walked away voluntarily. Probably figured you'd take that weekend visitation deal to avoid scandal. Hale's voice had that steel edge again. Keep your career clean. Stay quiet about the fraud. I looked down at the unsigned agreement in my jacket. The easy way out didn't look so easy anymore. The judge needs to see this, I said. All of it. The forged affidavit, the IP traces, my deployment records. And risk your command finding out? Could kiss that bonus goodbye. Maybe your career, too, if it gets messy enough. I thought about Gavin reaching for Brandon that day on the porch. Thought about all those video calls from deployment, trying to keep my son from forgetting my voice. Thought about that wooden crib I'd assembled with my own hands, still sitting in storage somewhere. Some things matter more than a career, I said quietly. You taught me that. Hale's weathered face broke into a thin smile. Just wanted to make sure you remembered. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. So, what's the play? I stared at the forged affidavit, at Brandon's mother's neat signature declaring I'd given up my son. The anger that rose wasn't the hot, desperate kind from that first day on the porch. This was cold, precise, the kind you could aim. We do this by the book, I said. Every regulation, every procedure, every chain of custody. Build it like we're prepping for an audit. Why's that? Because they're not just trying to take my son. I tapped the fraudulent document. They're committing a crime, and I'm going to prove it. 5 days before the hearing, my dining room table looked like a tactical operations center. Files, photos, and timelines spread out in precise rows. Each piece of evidence tagged, logged, and cross-referenced. My attorney, Ms. Kent, stood at one end with a red pen, marking up our presentation sequence. The forged affidavit is our hammer, she said, tapping the document. But we build to it. First, we establish your involvement, the support payments, the video calls, the crib receipts. Hale nodded from his spot by the window. Lead with the positive. Smart. Then we introduce the deployment logs, Martinez continued. Your location records, duty roster, all properly certified by your command. I traced a finger along the timeline we'd constructed. And that puts me 7,000 miles away when Brandon's mother allegedly notarized my signature. Exactly! Martinez circled a date in red. The IP traces on the benefit changes come next. Shows intent, preparation. Then we close with the fraudulent affidavit. My phone buzzed. Another notification from one of the local Facebook groups. I'd been getting them all week. Vague posts about troubled vets and custody drama. Someone was trying to poison the well before the hearing. Don't engage, Hale warned, seeing my expression. That's what they want. One angry response, one threatening message, and the dangerous soldier narrative writes itself. I finished. I know. The whispers had started small. A comment here, a shared post there. Just enough to plant seeds of doubt. Did you hear about that military dad? The one who came home angry? They say. I'd learned to stop reading the comments. Martinez gathered some papers into a folder. We've got mock cross-examination at 0900 tomorrow. They'll try to rattle you, make you look unstable. You need to be steel, I said, no matter what they throw. Looking at the evidence spread before us brought back memories of mission prep. The same methodical approach, the same attention to detail. Only this time, the objective wasn't some distant target. It was my son's future. Run me through the daycare logs again, Martinez said. I pulled out the certified copies. I'm listed as emergency contact from day one. Signed all the medical releases before deployment. Made sure they had my satellite phone number. Good. And the doorbell footage? Shows Brandon entering with his own key starting February 3rd. Regular pattern, usually between 1800 and 1900 hours. Matches the timestamps on his social media posts from inside the house. Hale grunted approval. You sound ready. Almost. I walked to my bedroom closet, pulled out my dress uniform. The ribbons and badges caught the light. Each one a story, a mission completed, a promise kept. I laid it out carefully, checking every detail. You sure about wearing that? Martinez asked. Some judges might see it as theatrical. It's who I am, I said simply. Soldier and father. I'm not hiding either one. The uniform reminded me of something my first sergeant told me years ago. Stand tall, speak truth, and let your record do the talking. That's what we had now. A record. Every document, every timestamp, every signature building a wall of facts against their lies. One last thing, Hale said. He pulled out his phone, showed me a post someone had shared. A photo of Vanessa and Brandon, posed with Gavin at some summer festival. The caption dripped with innuendo about real families and absent fathers. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Not our battlefield. Good man. He pocketed the phone. Save it for the court. Martinez gathered her files. Get some rest. Tomorrow's our last practice run. Then Thursday's the real thing. After they left, I stood in my quiet house, looking at the uniform laid out for battle. The evidence boxes stacked like ammunition. The timeline marking our advance to August 26th. In my mind, I could still see Gavin reaching for Brandon that day on the porch. The pain was still there, but it had hardened into purpose. They thought they could erase me with forged papers and whispered rumors. They were wrong. I touched the combat infantry badge on my uniform. Some things matter more than a career. Some battles you have to fight, no matter the cost. The phone buzzed again. Another notification, another rumor. I left it face down on the table. Let them whisper. In 2 days, evidence would speak louder than gossip. Truth would outweigh lies. And I would walk into that courtroom as exactly who I was, a soldier who kept his word, and a father who never stopped fighting for his son. The morning of August 26th arrived with the same crisp clarity as a pre-mission briefing. I'd polished every brass button, aligned every ribbon with carpenter's precision. The uniform wasn't just clothing. It was armor, identity, proof of who I was and what I stood for. My attorney, Marissa Kent, met me outside the courthouse steps. Remember, she said, let them throw the first punch. We counter with facts, not emotion. The courtroom looked exactly like I'd imagined during our prep sessions. Wood panels, flags, the weight of procedure in every corner. Vanessa sat with her attorney on the left, Brandon beside her. They'd dressed for suburban perfection, he in a blue suit that screamed, responsible stepfather, she in cream-colored business wear that whispered, protective mother. You know that moment before a firefight starts? When you can feel the pressure change in the air? That's what it felt like when the bailiff called us to order. Their attorney went straight for the jugular. Your Honor, this is a clear case of abandonment followed by aggressive behavior. He held up the custody order like a shield. Mr. Cole chose deployment over fatherhood, leaving my client to raise their child alone. When he finally returned, unannounced and confrontational, I kept my face neutral, just like we'd practiced. The deployment photos in my wallet burned against my chest. Me reading bedtime stories through a tablet screen, assembled care packages, wire transfer receipts for the crib. Furthermore, their attorney continued, brandishing the paternity acknowledgement, another man has stepped up to provide the stability this child needs. My client simply wants to protect her son from disruption. The judge, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair, studied the documents without expression. My pulse drummed cadence against my collar. Marissa rose slowly, deliberately. Your Honor, we have evidence that will significantly challenge the opposing counsel's narrative. She moved with the precision of someone disarming a device. First, the daycare logs. The documents appeared on the presentation screen. My name as emergency contact, medical release forms, vaccination records, all with my signature, all dated before deployment. Mr. Cole maintained consistent involvement despite serving overseas. Marissa highlighted a column of dates. Regular payments, not just child support, but extra funds for educational supplies, health care, even college savings. I watched Vanessa's perfectly composed expression flicker as the financial records appeared. Wire transfers, automatic payments, Amazon receipts for baby supplies shipped directly to our address. But most critically, Marissa continued, we have evidence regarding the benefit documentation. She introduced the forensic examiner's report. These forms, supposedly signed by my client, were actually processed from an IP address belonging to an apartment complex where the opposing party's witness resided at the time. The judge leaned forward slightly, the first crack in her impassive facade. Then came the moment we'd built toward. Marissa held up the notarized affidavit. Your Honor, this document, allegedly signed by Mr. Cole relinquishing his parental rights, bears a critical flaw. She placed it beside my deployment records. On the date this was supposedly notarized in Springfield, Missouri, Mr. Cole was documented serving in Operation Inherent Resolve, 7,000 miles away. The judge removed her glasses. Do you have verification of these deployment logs? Yes, Your Honor. Marissa produced the certified documents, complete with unit commander's seal. Additionally, we have satellite phone records and combat zone pay documentation confirming Mr. Cole's location. I kept my eyes forward, but I caught the quick glance between Vanessa and her attorney. The same look I'd seen when an opponent realizes they've stepped onto unstable ground. Furthermore, Marissa added, the notary who allegedly witnessed this document is the mother of the man now claiming paternity rights. The judge's pen stopped moving. She looked up sharply. Their attorney shifted papers, buying time. Your Honor, even if there are irregularities, in some documentation, the stable family environment was manufactured, Marissa cut in, through a series of fraudulent filings designed to erase my client's parental rights while he served his country. The room fell silent except for the soft whir of the air conditioning. I thought about all those nights in the desert, watching Gavin grow through video calls, planning the life I'd build with him. They'd tried to bury that truth under paperwork and lies, but like they taught us in training, the truth leaves traces. You just have to know where to look. The judge studied the deployment logs again, her expression hardening as she cross-referenced dates. She looked at the notarized affidavit, then at Brandon's mother in the gallery, then back at the documents. The first major cracks had appeared in their perfect story. Now it was time to watch it crumble. Their attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, regarding the IP address evidence, we question its reliability. Digital traces can be manipulated, spoofed even, without a more substantial chain of custody. I watched the judge's expression shift ever so slightly. She'd been following the technical details with the focus of someone who'd seen every trick in the book. If I may, Your Honor? Marissa stood. We anticipated questions about the forensic evidence. Our expert witness is present and prepared to testify regarding the methodology used. The judge nodded, and Jerry Chen, our forensic examiner, approached the stand. I'd met him earlier that week, former military intelligence, now running his own digital forensics firm. He had that same precise way of speaking I recognized from mission briefings. Mr. Chen, Marissa began, please explain how you verified the origin of these electronic signatures. The benefit enrollment system captures both IP addresses and device identifiers for security purposes, Jerry explained, pulling up his analysis on the courtroom screen. We found a consistent pattern of access from an IP address registered to the Oakwood Apartments, Unit 312. Their attorney jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. This is circumstantial. If you'll allow me to continue, Jerry said calmly. We also have corresponding GPS data from the mobile app used to submit these documents. The coordinates match precisely with the apartment location. I glanced at Vanessa. Her usual composed smile had frozen in place, like a crack spreading through glass. Furthermore, Jerry continued, these access patterns align with lease records showing the apartment was rented to Brandon Mitchell during this period. He gestured to the other man, the one who'd been holding my son that first day. The judge leaned forward. And you can verify these records haven't been altered? Yes, Your Honor. The Department of Defense maintains encrypted audit logs of all benefit system access. I've included the full verification report showing digital signatures that can't be forged without compromising military-grade encryption. I felt the shift in the room. You learn to recognize it in combat. That moment when the advantage finally tips your way. Marissa moved to her next exhibit. Your Honor, we'd like to introduce evidence regarding dependent access during the period in question. The new documents appeared on screen. Commissary records, base medical facility visits, dependent ID card uses, all while Vanessa was claiming I'd abandoned them. As you can see, Marissa highlighted dates. Mr. Cole's dependent benefits were being actively used throughout his deployment. This includes medical appointments, base shopping privileges, and housing allowance claims, all requiring his active duty status and formal acknowledgement of dependence. The judge's questions took on a sharper edge. Ms. Pryor, you claimed Mr. Cole provided no support during this period? Vanessa's attorney whispered something to her before responding. Your Honor, my client's position is that occasional use of military benefits doesn't constitute meaningful involvement. These records show weekly commissary visits, the judge cut in, regular medical appointments, housing allowance deposits. She removed her glasses, all while claiming abandonment in court filings. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'd seen that look before, when a commander spots a critical flaw in someone's story. Furthermore, the judge continued, these benefit accesses occurred simultaneously, with attempts to remove Mr. Cole's parental rights through the fraudulent affidavit we discussed earlier. Vanessa's perfect posture finally cracked. She whispered urgently to her attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. The judge checked her watch. We'll break for lunch. I'll hear closing arguments when we reconvene at 1300 hours. She gathered her papers. I suggest all parties use this time to reconsider their positions. The gallery erupted in whispered conversations as we filed out. In the hallway, I caught fragments of urgent strategy sessions from both legal teams. Marissa touched my arm, steering me toward a quiet corner. They're rattled, she said quietly. The benefit fraud angle hit harder than we expected. But don't get comfortable yet. They'll try something desperate after lunch. I nodded, watching Vanessa and her attorney hurry toward the conference rooms. My military training kicked in. Never celebrate until the mission's complete. But for the first time since coming home, I felt solid ground under my feet. The truth was finally breaking through, one document at a time. The courthouse cafeteria coffee tasted like deployment mess hall brew, bitter and somehow both burnt and watery. But I needed something to steady my hands. You'd think after all the high-stakes moments in uniform, a civilian courtroom wouldn't rattle me. Yet here I was, counting breaths like they taught us in pre-mission briefs. When we filed back in, the gallery had filled up even more. Word must have gotten around about the morning's revelations. I caught snippets of whispered speculation about benefit fraud and forged documents. Marissa stood, smoothing her jacket. Your Honor, the evidence before you tells a clear story. Not of abandonment, but of calculated deception. She moved to the podium with the same precise efficiency I'd seen in our prep sessions. Let's review the timeline. The courtroom screen lit up with our documented trail. While Mr. Cole was deployed, serving his country, The respondent engaged in a systematic effort to remove him from his child's life. She filed false abandonment claims while actively using his military benefits. She allowed another man to assume a parental role while collecting dependent support. And, most egregiously, Marissa paused, letting the weight build. She participated in creating fraudulent documentation to strip him of his parental rights. The image on screen split. My deployment duty log on one side, the notarized affidavit on the other. The dates matched perfectly. Your Honor, on March 15th, when this affidavit claims Mr. Cole appeared in person to relinquish his rights, he was verifiably 7,000 miles away, conducting documented operations in a combat zone. I heard a sharp intake of breath from somewhere behind me. The judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. The notary who certified this document, Marissa continued, is the mother of Brandon Mitchell, the same man who was presented to Mr. Cole's child as Daddy upon his return. This wasn't a simple custody dispute. This was a coordinated effort to exploit military service as a weapon against a deployed father. Objection! Vanessa's attorney shot up. Counsel is editorializing. The evidence speaks for itself, Marissa countered. We have proven systematic benefit fraud, document forgery, and perjury in official filings, each piece supported by military records, electronic forensics, and the respondent's own documented action. The judge held up her hand. Counselor, regarding the notarized affidavit, you realize this raises serious criminal implications? Your Honor, we are prepared to address the custody matter today. The criminal aspects can be— This court cannot ignore evidence of notary fraud, the judge cut in, especially when used to deliberately mislead family court proceedings. She turned toward Vanessa's table. Counsel, do you wish to address these allegations? Vanessa's attorney rose slowly. I recognized the look of someone trying to salvage a losing position. Your Honor, while we acknowledge discrepancies in some documentation, the underlying concern has always been the child's best interest. Best interest? The judge's tone could have frozen water. You're suggesting it serves a child's best interest to fraudulently sever ties with a deployed parent, to fabricate abandonment while actively using that same parent's military benefits? The attorney shifted tactics. Perhaps we could negotiate a modified arrangement that— I've heard enough. The judge closed her folder with a sharp snap. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. I felt my pulse in my throat as she removed her glasses, her expression granite hard. Remember that morning in the desert, just before dawn, when the air gets so still you can hear sand shifting? The courtroom had that same suspended quality, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the first shot to break the silence. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Everything I'd fought for, every piece of evidence we'd gathered, every late night parsing documents and building our case, it all came down to this moment. The scale could tip either way. The judge's voice cut through the tension. This court takes allegations of fraud extremely seriously. When that fraud specifically targets a service member's parental rights during deployment, it becomes not just a family matter, but a matter of public policy. She lifted a paper, scanning it briefly. I am vacating all previous orders obtained through fraudulent filings. The birth certificate will be corrected to reflect Mr. Cole's paternity. Primary physical custody will be awarded to the father pending a full review. My vision blurred slightly. Marissa's hand found my arm, steadying me. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am referring evidence of benefit fraud and document forgery to the district attorney's office for review. Mr. Mitchell is hereby barred from contact with the minor child until further notice. She fixed Vanessa with a stern look. Ms. Pryor, you may petition for supervised visitation after completing a court-approved co-parenting course. We'll schedule a review hearing in 90 days. The judge's final words still echoed in my ears as we filed out of the courtroom. I stood in the hallway, letting the reality sink in while my attorney gathered our files. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the marble floor. "George," Marissa touched my arm. "You should know. The filings are public record now. All of it." I nodded, watching Vanessa and her attorney hurry toward the elevator. Their whispered conversation carried an edge of panic. My phone buzzed, notifications flooding in as her carefully curated social media empire started to crumble. "Her sponsorships," Marissa explained, checking her own phone. "They're dropping her, fast. Seems they don't appreciate being part of a military benefits fraud scheme. Remember those moments in the field when the dust finally settles and you can see what's left standing? This felt like that. The truth had a way of clearing the air. 3 days later, I carried Gavin through our front door. He was bigger than in my deployment videos, heavier in my arms, but his laugh hadn't changed. The same bright sound that had kept me going through all those desert nights. "Look here, buddy." I set him down by the door where I'd lined up our boots, my worn desert tan ones next to his tiny blue rain boots. "See? Just like Daddy's." He stomped his feet next to mine, mimicking my stance. "Big boots?" "That's right, son." The word felt right in my mouth again. Natural. Like coming home after a long patrol. We spent that afternoon in the garage, working on a special project. I'd picked up a wooden plank from the hardware store, along with some wood-burning tools. Gavin sat in my lap, his small hands wrapped around mine as we traced the letters together. "D," I guided his fingers. "Ah, D. Hot," he said, fascinated by the wisps of smoke. "Very hot," I agreed. "That's why we're extra careful." The finished sign wasn't perfect. Some letters were deeper than others, and there was a small scorch mark where Gavin had gotten excited. But that made it better somehow. Real. In the kitchen, I pulled out the pancake mix, the same brand my grandfather used to use. The smell of butter hitting the griddle filled the house, replacing the sterile emptiness with something warmer. More alive. "Want to help?" I lifted Gavin onto the counter. "Watch this." I poured the batter in a circle, then added 2 smaller ones above it. "See? Mickey Mouse pancakes." His eyes lit up. "Mickey!" I remembered those video calls, promising him pancakes when I got home. Some promises take longer to keep than others, but that doesn't make them less important. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as we settled into our chairs. Above the table hung our wood-burned sign. Dad's chair. Not perfect, but honest. Like everything worth fighting for. Gavin drowned his pancakes in syrup, just like I used to at his age. I lifted my coffee mug, watching the light catch the steam rising from it. The quiet moment felt earned, like the pause after a hard-won victory. "You know something, buddy?" I said, more to myself than to him. "A real father shows up when it's hardest." He looked up at me, face sticky with syrup, and smiled that unguarded smile that made everything. The court battles, the sleepless nights, all of it. Worth it. "More Mickey?" he asked, pointing at his empty plate. "You got it, son." I stood up, ruffling his hair as I passed. "Coming right up." Through the window, I could see our boots by the door, big and small, standing together. Not just shoes anymore, but a promise kept. A new start. The griddle was still hot, ready for another round of pancakes. In the background, Gavin hummed to himself, secure in the simple truth that Dad was home. Not just for weekends or supervised visits, but for all the small moments that make up a life. Some victories change everything. Others just set things right, the way they should have been all along. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.